So this is like 2003, and we got a PA system. We got an empty venue, and we would just like turn the lights down and just like practice our moves and our spin kicks. And dude, it was like so
you would turn the
funny.
lights off and like you're really trying to replicate the moment.
We would set the mood.
What is up, my friends? Thanks again for tuning in. This is the Scoped Exposure podcast. You know, people know Scoped Exposure for just, in my opinion, just riding for Western Canada through and through. And I feel like there's a lot of, you know, when you're thinking of the bands that really paved the way for a lot of what's happening right now, a band, in my opinion, that doesn't get enough credit and not enough roses and accolades is kind of the theme of today's episode. And I've been punishing Jon to come on the podcast for a long ass time here, and the man's very, very busy, but the stars have finally aligned, and I'm very, very honored and excited to be welcoming Jon of Gravemaker on the Scope Exposure podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me,
dude. It's there's a lot of lore and a lot of great stuff that I'm very excited to be getting into with you. I don't know how familiar you are with the show, but it sounds like on the Bev side, you've come prepared. So I'm very excited to hear what you got.
Yeah, I got a couple. Well, I got my 4-liter Yeti, which is always with me, which has always got my BioSteel and my Himalayan salt. And then I got my greens drink, and I got a cup of coffee on the go. So I usually got a few things on the go. This thing doesn't leave my side. Usually go through 1 or 2 of these a day. So
right. So you fill that up with water and then mix a couple things in the mix of it as well?
I got, all my electrolytes. It keeps me from cramping. And then I just moved in with my girl last summer, and she is like a soda connoisseur. And I thought it was kind of over the top and ridiculous. So we got a beer fridge full of all these diet sodies. Mm-hmm. And I'm like slowly getting turned. So now I'm like having like 1 or 2 a day with her. But I didn't know people were like obsessed with soda. So I started listening to your show, and then I started jamming out the last few weeks, listening to it, and all the, you know, Guy from Harm's Way and you guys. Yeah. So I guess she's not an outcast. I guess there's a lot of them. So
yeah, there's, I feel like at least for Diet Coke specifically, there's almost like a cultish kind of behavior for people that really, really like it. But I think there's a similar kind of obsession, whether it's like, you know, the polar seltzers or things like that. You know, it's the same with sports teams. You kind of find something that you identify with, and that becomes your team.
Totally.
But
totally.
I'm also a connoisseur, so I kind of like I play the field at times.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very early on a Sunday morning, so I'm just kind of at the remnants of the morning coffee, and one of my favorite mugs as well. It's by a ceramicist called Chelsea Faith. It's like
that's badass.
She does the mugs, and then her husband, who's a tattoo artist, like does the painting and the designs.
Hell yeah.
And then I also got raspberry bubbly, just to kind of you know, make sure the Bev consumption is at an all-time high.
Nice.
Yeah. But dude,
I got this cup here. This is in honor of my little pug Maggie. So I got my little pug cup with my coffee.
Oh, nice.
Well, yeah, and then cheers, buddy.
Eagles to pugs.
There you go, buddy. Cheers. Hell yeah. Mm.
So, Jon, again, how we kind of start things off for someone who's never been on our show before, I always like to kind of get a bit of kind of the origin story of how they discovered heavy music, hardcore, however you want to spin it. So talk to me about like kind of the first time that you heard something like that and kind of what initially put you on the path.
Well, I want to thank you for asking me to come on, man, because I've been so detached for, over a decade now that I just I'm pretty like high speed with it that I got going on that I haven't like stopped to think about hardcore music for so long. And so obviously like we agreed to do the podcast together, and it's actually given me some time to like reminisce on, you know, what it was like getting into hardcore and like, just, it was so freaking long ago. I mean, compared to some of the old school guys, maybe not, but yeah, man, like I appreciate you asking me to come on, because I've been able to like kind of go back through some journals and some pictures and like it's been cool. But like my introduction to hardcore, I grew up in not a very good home environment, and a lot of us young kids, I grew up in a small town called Vernon, started going to punk shows, like just local punk shows like Gob and Snow Jam and shit like that. And we were like 13 years old, and we'd wear punk shirts and like stick safety pins through our eyebrows and like go mosh and shit. And like I guess there was a group of older kids that were going to these punk shows, and I didn't really know there was genres growing up like Pantera or ska or hardcore or Hatebreed. It was all just like aggressive music or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know there was genres. So like we would go to these punk shows, and I was a young kind of troubled kid, and these older guys like took me under their wing. And by older, I mean they were probably like 18 at the time.
Right.
And so yeah, like they took me under their wing, and like we went down. I went to Warped Tour in '99. I was like 13, and then went to Ozfest like a few weeks later. I was also 13. But then I ended up like leaving home at 14 years old, and like the guys that kind of took me under their wing, they had like a punk house downtown Vernon. Who the mom lived upstairs, so and a lot of the kids were straight edge, so it wasn't like a punk house like drinking. Well, there was a lot of drinking and smoking weed and stuff, but the mom, she was like super supportive. So we booked shows in the basement, and like some Vancouver hardcore bands would come in, like Burden, Descent, I think like Straight Face played and stuff like that. So I was like 13. Moved out at 14, and I was living in the basement, and they had the guys that ran that house ended up going to a construction site and stole a bunch of plywood and 2x4s. They built me a room it was awesome, man. So
that's crazy.
It was like my introduction was just like a lot of us, I've been trying to like backtrack here, but like getting into the hardcore scene, it was just like a family, and like as cheesy as that sounds, it's true. And it gave me like a sense of belonging. And I didn't really have that at that point in my life. And so, yeah, like I kind of went off the grid there for a couple of years. I got hooked on drugs really, really young. The one rule living in that house was that I had to stay in school, and I was expelled like super quick. And so then kind of bounced around from like living in drug houses and stuff like that and selling drugs. And I was just going down a really, really bad path. That was like 14 till I was like 17. And then just a lot of run-ins with the police and just getting in trouble, and lost a lot of friends and stuff. And I ended up getting cleaned up when I was like 17. And when I got cleaned up, I traced back to like my roots. So even though I was never straight edge when I was young, I remember those guys talking about it. And back then, like the straight edge guys and like the drunk punks, or like me, I was doing like hardcore drugs. Like there wasn't separation, I guess. Like the straight edge kids always treated us with love, and we were also fucking young too. So, but when I got cleaned up when I was like 17, I remember that word straight edge and like hardcore and like, the California takeover and strife and trial, and kind of just fell back into the hardcore scene. I was like 17, and then it was just like freaking 100 miles an hour since then. So moved home when I was like 17, and Christopher, my little brother, when I moved out for a few years, they bought him like drums and guitars and stuff. So he would like teach me how to play. And we just, I don't know. That was like my introduction to hardcore. So I got into hardcore and punk like 13, like 98, 99, and then obviously fell off for a couple of years and got in a lot of trouble with the law and with drug addiction and stuff like that. And then, 17 brought me back in, and then moved to East Van when I was 18, and just like playing in like local bands and just trying to get my ass on tour, watching like the Hellfest, like, was it a VHS? I think we watched it online, like a desktop. And I was like, I'm going to Hellfest. So like from Vernon to Syracuse, New York was a 3.5 day Greyhound bus. So I took my skateboard, 3.5 days on a Greyhound, got to Hellfest, moshed for 3 days, home. And then the next year I went to Hellfest in Syracuse. I flew that time, but that was like my introduction to like, Until the End and like Shattered Realm and all these like heavy bands. And then it just took off from there. But when I lived in that punk house, I try to like go down memory lane here, but Darcy, he was like my big bro, and he always took care of me, even when I was struggling with drug addiction and stuff. And I remember sitting around him. He would be on his laptop because he would book shows out of the basement, and we would just stand around him, and he would be talking to guys from Victory Records, and they would send him care packages. And like we got Hatebreed and Buried Alive and Scarhead and Blood for Blood. And I was like, hey, this is it. This is the shit.
Right.
And so I always just start going.
No, there's just so much good stuff that I want to break down here, and
Sure.
I wanted to allow you to kind of like, because like you said at the beginning, there's a lot of stuff that you're kind of
Yeah.
recalling to, but I think the the interesting thing that I first wanted to get into is just the aspect of like, some people, a lot of people actually like in the punk world or the hardcore community come from that broken household life, and then they kind of like find a sense of community and like
Big time.
just unapologetic like care and love. Like you almost like one of my favorite things about hardcore is that just the aspect of listening to the same kind of music is the unlock to you need a place to sleep, you want to eat my food, you want to get a ride, like whatever it is, and that is just not something that I think any other music genre has.
Agreed.
I think looking back, like, because you're spending your 14 to 17 like very just like formative years, like did that look like, was it when you talk to other people, maybe like, because I know you were in and out of school at the time, but like did you just think that that was the norm for any kid growing up, or did you know that that was a unique situation to you at the time?
You mean like when I was out doing that, when I was out on the sorry, when I was
like,
out selling drugs and stuff?
It's well, not even that, but just like the aspect of like, oh, like doesn't every other kid like live at a punk house and do shows and do all these other things? Like,
I guess like, I don't know if this answers your question. I knew I had something special. And I always had older guys really, really looking out for me, even when I was a total fuck up dude, like stealing cars and breaking into houses. And I always was given a second chance, hanging out with some bad people. Because I was like kind of like with the hardcore kids and the punk kids, but I also had all my stupid wannabe criminal friends that were just fucking losers and drug addicts and stuff that were also older. And like, I knew what I had as far as like the hardcore scene and stuff was special. But like, I didn't know a lot of people had like normal lives until I was with a girl for many years and watching her with her family and her friends and her upbringing and hearing her stories. And I started to connect the dots, like in my whatever, late 20s, early 30s, like, oh, wait a second, maybe my situation is a bit unique. I don't know. I never really took the time to stop and think about it or feel sorry for myself. I've just always been like pretty like hard headed and push through and get through it. I didn't really realize how fucked up it can be. It was maybe until I started getting older and talking to other people and other guys and hearing how their upbringings were. But like at the same time, dude, like when I got sober, I've been in and out of that stuff for a long time. Like when I moved to Vancouver, I started volunteering downtown East Side right away. I volunteered for like 5 years, working with other street kids, other kids that were having issues with drugs and broken homes. So like I never really took the time to think like, oh, my situation was unique. I just thought there was a lot of people out there that had the same shit that I went through. And in all honesty too, I don't even think mine was that bad compared to a lot of other kids. Like there's a lot of kids that had it like a million times worse. Right. And it could have been worse. Like I always would say that it could have been worse, but I don't know if that answers your question. I did feel that what I had in that punk and hardcore scene, living in Darcy's house, going to shows, these older guys always taking me under their wing. I felt special for sure. It felt special. It felt like a family. So yeah, and
it's almost interesting on just like if you remove the music and the shows and all those things out of it, like I feel like that's almost like a great, like there are countless other examples of that where it is just a trap house where it's just like whatever is happening on the day and there's a bunch of like shit, but like at least having some anchor point to like doing something that's like not even like looking at it negatively or positively, but like productive as far as like, we're like congregating these kids to just like get in a basement. It's so ludicrous when you try to explain it to like if I was to explain it to my parents or something. But like until you're actually in a room where you get to experience that and you kind of like chase that kind of high, like that's always like
true.
Like that's something that people can and will do for their entire lives. They're just like, whatever's going on in my life, that's a centering point for me.
Yeah, and it is hard to explain it. I call them civilians. I mean, I've been in an industry for over a decade now, but I didn't even talk about touring for the first several years I was in the trade because, like, how do you explain that you lived in a van and sleeping on people's floors? Like, what do you mean, like, some random just lets you sleep on his floor? It's like you kind of said at the beginning of the podcast, it's very unique. Dude, we never ever paid for a hotel. That was like our rule, and we always met kids at the merch table. And like, what other scene can do that? Like strangers in England or in Europe or in the States.
Oh, even
wherever,
when you guys were doing international stuff, like no hotels.
Oh, actually, sorry, let me take that back. In Europe, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Europe, it was beds upstairs in the venue, or we'd sleep on a bus. Sure. But yeah, sorry, I misspoke there. But
at least on North American soil.
Yeah, but we slept at some kids' houses in Europe. We would, like, especially like our first European tour was like 60 shows. We weren't sleeping at a lot of venues. We're sleeping at a lot of random people's houses. But yeah, it's very unique, one of a kind. And like when I got into the trades, like, how do you fucking explain that?
Right.
Yeah.
When we had Dan from King 9 on the show, he's a steel worker, does a lot of like, you know, working on huge buildings and shit, like very similar to your world as far as your, you know, 9 to 5. But he was saying when he tries to explain, you know, what King 9 has done and what they continue to do, it almost is like a normie is like, it's almost like you lived like a full other life and now you're doing this as well. So like, yeah, you're like, where do I kind of even begin to explain? Dude, like I could fly to another country and play to hundreds of kids and then go crazy and then sleep on the floor. And it's just, it sounds like lunacy.
Yeah, and also too, I felt like I sound like I was lying, because how do you say that? Right. So I just like wouldn't really talk about it. And, you know, I've been in the industry for a minute now, and you know, I'm doing my thing, and so now it's like a little more open. And like, it's funny, I got like random guys I work with sending me like Gravemaker songs, like, give me merch. I think we have merch like stashed away somewhere. I got to find it, but
oh, bro.
Yeah.
I'm gonna punish you about that afterwards.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let's talk about just the. Oh, well, I guess there's a lot of your story I want to still kind of break into before we start to get to like beginnings of Gravemaker. So, you know, life kind of turns in a positive direction, kind of like when you're exiting your teens and then you move from Vernon to Vancouver.
Yep.
Am I understanding the timeline correctly?
Yeah. September 2003, moved into my first house here with a bunch of buddies. Yeah.
Cool.
Bunch of hardcore kids.
Do you think it was like kind of like necessary for you to kind of escape, like, because it's natural for a lot of like small towns to kind of like have a lot of that like gang, drug, and just like kind of that kind of culture and experience, just because it's like there's nothing to do. That's kind of the classic trope. So do you think it was kind of necessary for you to be
Absolutely.
Like, I'm getting clean, but I also need to remove myself from this situation?
Absolutely. Like when I was getting clean, and like some of the straight edge kids in Vernon, dude, they were so good to me. But we spent all of our time loading up in a minivan, going to Seattle, to Graceland, to shows weren't super big in Vancouver, but we'd be doing road trips to Vancouver. And as soon as I graduated, I'm like, I'm out of here. But it also had a lot of very, very bad memories in Vernon, just from just shit that went down. And so like I can go back now. I'm like almost 40 now. So I can go back now and see it for its beauty, but it took very, very, very long time to actually enjoy going back there, because I was associated like certain areas with like bad memories, and, you know, lost a lot of friends over the years and stuff. Yeah. So when I moved to Vancouver, it was like a fresh start. No one knew me. The problem too was like when I was kicked out of school, I was arrested, right, with possession. And it when you go through that in a smaller town, like it escalated so quickly, you know, and I obviously had heroin and like other hardcore drugs on me and scales and stuff. And I was just being a fucking idiot. And that just no parent wanted their kids near me. Teachers were scared of me when I came back, even though I was trying to turn my life around. I had like one principal, Mr. Grist, and I had another teacher, Mr. Advent, that like totally, you know, looked out for me and saw that I was trying to get better. I had to go like drug and alcohol counseling and get through all that shit. But I had a couple teachers that really stuck out for me and stuff, and they fast tracked me because they knew if they held me back all the years that I missed, I would never graduate. So they helped like expedite me, graduated, and then I just needed to get out of there because everyone saw me, even though I was trying to get clean and change my life around. Everybody would see me. And it's small town living, right? You get judged or felt like I was getting judged at least.
Yeah.
And when I came to Vancouver, nobody knew anything, man. And like all the straight edge kids I hung out with, like I would tell them a little bit what I'd been through, but it was almost too heavy for them. I remember like driving to Seattle, trying to like tell them a little bit. And I could just see that it was the wrong place, because they were all Christian kids that grew up with like good homes and stuff like that. So like the hardcore scene kind of was my outlet, to be honest, because like I went through a little bit of drug and alcohol counseling because I had to, but I never got deep into, I never really figured out a lot of my other things. So the hardcore scene was like my outlet, to be honest. And I moved to Vancouver at 18 and just fucking went to every show, moshed for every band, like just watching whatever Hellfest and then trying to mimic all the spin kicks and head walking at every show I'd go to. And it was fucking awesome, man. It was like a total outlet for me. But yeah, went back to your question. Yeah, I moved to Vancouver for a fresh start, which was exactly what it gave me.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything about my past and I could just like have a fresh start. So yeah.
So when you start going to these shows, is the, I guess, desire at the time just to like you said, like have that be your outlet, but like there was no initial thoughts. Like when did the idea of like being in a band, at least for you, come into the picture? Because I don't know how many bands you were in prior to Gravemaker that you want to at least disclose. Because
for sure, keep totally. I've heard a couple of guys say I played a band that I will not name, and I'm like, I can relate with that. So, like when I moved to the city when I was 18, I moved here with some other musicians and hardcore kids and stuff. So we started playing in like a little metal band, and like it was not hardcore at all, but I was just so stoked to play the drums, and I wasn't even good at them, but I was just stoked to play and set up some shows. We actually played with like Animosity from San Francisco for like a week or so. Yeah, dude, they were babies too. They were like, Leo, I think was like 17. The singer was still in high school. That was like 2003. But like, yeah, right away when I got cleaned up and was getting my shit turned around, I wanted to play in a band right away. Even though I was not a good musician and I was not trained musically, I just wanted that outlet of just playing drums or playing an instrument and playing in a hardcore band and having kids just like lose their shit for you. And I was always like an outlet for me, man. Like even when Gravemaker played shows, I remember like I was never like a talented musician, but I would just like lose my mind on stage. And like when we'd finish playing our 20-minute set, I just always felt like so calm after. I was like, oh, I feel so much better, and like I kind of always had that from a young age, like playing like in the few hardcore bands or metal bands that I did, and then like trying to get on tour like right away. And just, I don't know, I always just had like a connection with that. I just always wanted to play in a band or tour in a band and, just be around the hardcore scene, be at hardcore shows. Right. Any show, man, I would go. Even like the scene here was not no heavy bands, like, Champion and Blue Monday and stuff, but I still would go to every show and mosh. Even those guys fucking hated me because I'd be spin kicking kids that were trying to watch their bands. But like, yeah, I was hooked, man. I was hooked. Yeah.
What? So you were a drummer first, it sounds like.
Yeah, I played drums first. Again, Christopher, when I moved home, I was gone for a few years. He had a bunch of instruments and he was just like, this is how you play. And he would just teach me breakdowns. He had a double bass and it was just like, just mosh. Right. And that's basically
so you'd be on the drums and he'd be like
playing guitar
or something.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then found other musicians and like, we just would fucking play and make songs and try to play shows and yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like, because doing playing drums in a band versus like singing and fronting a band and being the one to pass around the mic is like a totally different responsibility and role. So like, because some people like they'll play an instrument and then they like kind of fantasize or they figure out a way to maybe front a band one day. And some people like have to do it just out of necessity. Like where were you on that scale?
Well, the transition, I didn't play in any bands. I played like, there was a dude from Trial that started like a little side project. I tried to play with him on drums and I tried to play some other little bands, but I eventually met Bailey from Gravemaker and Wayne, and we became super close. And we started this band called Gravemaker, and I was playing bass and sucked at it. And then our singer at the time, Andy Rice, we were trying to jam with in Seattle, he quit. I don't know why he quit. He had to quit for personal reasons. He had something going on or he was moving. And I remember the day we were like, well, we still want to play in a band. So we fucking passed the mic around and whoever sucked the least, you're in charge of singing. So we all sucked ass, but I sucked the least. And yeah, that's kind of how I got stuck with the job. And then just kind of, yeah, that's basically how it started, dude.
So yours was just like your metrics of being good was just slightly above everyone else.
Totally. I wish we had the footage, man. Like iPhones and stuff didn't exist back then, but I remember like I'd go on the drums, and then Wayne would try, and then we'd all like, and then Brian would try. We'd all like pass the mic around. We're in this little jam space in northern Seattle, and it's like, dude, that was rough, but I guess Jon takes the cake, so figure it out, buddy. Yeah,
I love that. Okay, so I guess like, you know, it kind of falls into your lap in a sense. And I think the first thing that you guys put out is you had a demo in 2007. And just correct me if I'm wrong, just in case the discogs are incorrectly, but some of those tracks off the demo did make it onto when Bury Me at Sea comes out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we did a little 3-song demo, and like, I don't know if bands still do that, but we like made a little burned like CDRs and made like a little slip and a sticker, and we just passed those out, gave away for free. Yeah, we did 3 songs on there, and I think I had to go through our discography to remember what we made, but I think those 3 songs made it on one of our Bury Me at Sea record.
Yeah, let me pull it up. I was kind of doing some late night. I also like, this might be incorrect also, but it says on Discogs that Chris Williams is credited to do the artwork for the demo.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Dude, Chris was always super close with Wayne, and they still are. And Chris was always just such a solid dude. And obviously been friends with him in and out of playing in bands and stuff. He was him and like Greg from Trial, like Greg Bennett, like all those dudes would just come and like mosh for our band when we first started our first couple shows and showed us a lot of love. And Chris Williams, I'm pretty sure he did the artwork. And then like, yeah. Andy Rice left, so then I started singing, and we just tried to make it work.
Mm-hmm. So Time Heals Nothing, which is the opening track of Bury Me at Sea, and then The Boatman and Dear Brother. That was kind of the collection of songs. It seems that you guys did the demo as like, you self-released it first, but then I think the year after in 2008, you released it through Copper Lung Records with kind of an art cover that's just it's like a bunch of demons, and then it just says grave, but no grave maker.
Dude, I forgot about that.
What?
Dude, I suck, man. I had to go through like online to figure out what we wrote because it's been so long, and I totally forgot about that. Yeah, so it said grave on one side and then maker on the other side, and it had those demons. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about that.
And then there seems to be another repress of it with the BC province outline, and this is like grave maker or GM, but like on keys that are crossed.
Yeah,
dude. Yeah,
I gotta see this.
Here, maybe I can send it
to me in
the chat. Maybe I'll drop it in the chat here for you to see. Can I do that?
I'm in the chat.
Maybe not. Wait. Give me a second. We are working here over at Scoped Exposure Podcast World to be able to. Let me just do this. I'll just share.
Yeah, it's all good.
So you can see.
It's all good.
We are trying to work on a way to be able to kind of do this stuff a little bit more. So apologize, Jordan. You're gonna.
No, it's all good.
All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so we got the regular.
Yeah, nice.
And then down here is the.
Yeah.
So was it these same creatures on the other side, and it said maker, or there's 3 new characters?
I think it might have been 3 new characters.
Oh damn, we got 6 grave makees.
Fuck yeah!
I'll have to look for the backside, and then this.
Dude, I didn't even remember that.
It seems like it was just like a really
spray painted on there.
Yeah, it's cool. I like the geography vibe.
Yeah, it's cool. Dude, I never remember.
Very late 2000s though with the keys.
Oh yeah,
seems like a lot of bands were doing the keys.
Yeah, it was like crossed AK-47s, so we were like all mosh warriors in the 2000s, and then like progressed into like hammers or keys and shit. Yeah,
very much so. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to Bury Me at Sea, and this was my entry into you guys, and
sweet.
You know, this is. I'm going to punish you a little bit off of like, you know, me finding you guys. So I was at a just like a local CD store, kind of just looking through, and I didn't know, like, I'm just getting into hardcore at this point and heavier music, and I didn't know that you guys were Vancouver based. I didn't know any of that. I was just like, I just saw this cover with this guy who had like nickels in his eyes, and it just had like fucked up teeth, and I was like, this looks sick. I'm gonna pick this up.
Hell yeah.
Kind of the one and only times, you know, that I was getting something solely off of just like the feeling and the, you know, how it's making me feel in the moment. And like, I'm definitely coming from the world of like, you know, the metal breakdowns and things like that. So to get something that was like tried and true hardcore was like it was brand new for me, but I just was like, there's something to this, and there's like this style of aggression is newer to me, but there's like something more special about it than like someone having a crazy metal voice or something like that. Like, I even think going out of Time Hails Nothing into like the next track, and you holding that yell kind of like to kind of transition the songs, and your voice is like breaking up. I was like, this is so like the rawness of it was so like, looking back, it was so important to me at the time to kind of like steer, you know, the ship in that direction.
Thanks, man.
So yeah, like, let's just talk about that release, because that's the first release that you guys did on a label as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it came out on Think Fast Records.
Yeah.
Which I can't remember any other, just kind of looking through if there's anything else that I can remember coming out on that. But at the time, like, you guys putting out like something on a record, like, did that feel like a big, like, whoa, this is a big step up?
Dude, it was awesome. Yeah. And when we wrote that record, you know, we were so green, man. And like, I remember writing songs and demoing songs and in the studio, and everything was just so new for all of us. So Bailey had a little bit of experience because he played in Figure Four and played some other bands, Shattered Realm and stuff. But for Wayne and I, it was like brand new. And yeah, man, like, just like, we were young and green, and you know, we wrote a lot as we went, and we were figuring shit out as we were going in the studio. Like, we were coming in not very prepared, and then as soon as, you know, we Bailey booked our first show in January 2008, and we didn't come home for 6 months. And we were just playing show after show after show after show. And a lot of them were just like floor shows with a couple kids. We're hopping on. Bailey knew a lot of people. But when that record came out, it was awesome, and we had something to tour on. And, you know, we weren't really internet savvy. So when we had a record, then it was awesome. We had something to give kids at shows so kids could get our music. And yeah, it felt awesome, man. I was like, we were so stoked to be on tour, and the reaction it got for us was couldn't imagine, like, some of the shows we were getting off that record. Because, like, I'm going to be honest with you, when I grew up in hardcore, when I met Wayne, I always wanted to sound like bands like Hatebreed and Until the End, and like heavy beatdown bands, Shattered Realm. And Wayne just put his foot down, and he's like, no, Wayne was more into like melodic hardcore, and so was Brian. Bailey and I were more into like aggressive, like beat down, heavier stuff. So that was kind of where we ended up. Like, I always wanted to play in like a heavy ass band, but Wayne wouldn't. And Brian, they were more into like, you know, melodic hardcore and Youth Crew or whatever. And that's kind of where we ended up with Gravemaker. Like, I just was so stoked to be in a band with Wayne and Bailey, and just stoked to tour, that I was just like, hey, fuck it, this is what it is. I'm not going to make a stink about it. I wanted to sound heavier. I tried to convince Wayne to play double bass. He wouldn't do it. I wanted to sound heavier, but, you know, I was just so pumped to be on tour that I just was willing to play whatever. And the kids, like, you know, they sang along, and that was pretty awesome, right?
Yeah. So I think also it's important to note, like, well, two things. The first, you know, it's funny you saying, yeah, we were internet savvy. And I think it's important to say in 2024 that, like, this is an era of hardcore where there's, like, MySpace. Like, you guys you do have a Facebook, but, like, it is way more barren than, like, what I have seen through, like, the MySpace. And I feel like there's almost like a badge of honor that is like, yeah, we, like, this was the social media that we were using at the time. Yeah. Definitely like a golden era. But it's like, I think sonically as well, like, Gravemaker is kind of coming up around this time where, like, Backtrack and Expire and all those, like that kind of sound. It's like it's still hardcore, and then there are some bands who like lean a little bit more melodic, a little bit more metallic, but it all works well within that pocket. And yeah, like I think sometimes it's also good to have like slightly differing of, I guess, like you want to have a unified vision and an agreed upon vision of what you're trying to do. But like if you're trying to push a little bit more heavier and then you have someone who's trying to be a little bit more melodic, it creates like a bit of like a tension that kind of like you're pulling in opposite directions to kind of bring like a really unique kind of product versus everyone kind of all being in the same like box, and then it kind of just feels cookie cutter to a degree.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was good. And the boys threw me a bone. Like they let me pick Last Breath by Hatebreed. So we got to scratch that itch. So we play that song on tour. That was fucking always a blast.
Right. I hope that one day, like someone could do the Lord's work into seeing how many bands in their existence, whether like a small little band that was around for a year or a ginormous band that's still going on, how many bands covered Hatebreed in their lifetime? Because like it almost feels like a requirement.
Dude,
it feels wrong if you don't do it.
They're the best to do it, man. I'm like, I'm older now, and I still listen to Satisfaction and Perseverance, and it hits the exact same way it did the first time I heard it.
Right.
Yeah, they're the best to do it. Actually, we got to do our record release in Seattle. I don't know who set that up for us, but we played the Graceland, which is called, I think, El Corzo now, in Seattle, which was the venue I grew up going to as a young up-and-comer. We did our record release there. I don't know who got that set up. We got Hatebreed to fly in to play it with us. They played their first half. Their set was all their old shit, and then for the first 45 minutes, and then they did all their newer stuff for the last 45 minutes. So all like the metal bros and stuff chilled on the side and let us just beat the fuck out of each other. And then that set that was over. Then all the metal guys came in, and then they got to do their push mosh release. It was awesome, man. That was one of the craziest shows we ever played. I really wish there was more footage for shows like that. Like we played a lot of shows that were teeny tiny floor shows with 10 kids, but we also got to play a handful of ones that were very memorable, like that one, for example. I just wish there was more footage. I would love to see it.
Yeah. It was like kind of going through the archives, like the amount of bands that I saw you guys either opening for on a tour or, even just kind of being direct support kind of during their up and coming time is so crazy. Like
how many bands we play with?
Yeah. Like I would see Foundation on there, like tons of like you did a number of tours with Comeback Kid as well. And just like, so many bands. It's like, man, like if you brought this lineup to modern day, it would be like crazy. And I'm sure like, and it's just kind of wild to see what happens on in the spider web of like all these bands kind of coming up, and you never know. And I think it's important to kind of document it, whether you do, taking all those posters and talking about it here on a podcast or you film shows.
Yeah, I agree.
Whatever.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's honestly kind of why I was stoked to do this, because I haven't talked about this in so long. And so since we agreed to do it, you've been so nice about asking me, and I'm always like, no, I'm too busy. No, I'm too busy. And finally, I'm like, dude, just do it. Because like I might as well speak on it before like I forget, dude, because I've been hitting the head lots and my memory's not that great. So it's been nice to actually go down this last few weeks and kind of and back to what you were saying, like with the bands that we toured with that were new and watching them blow up. That was always cool. Like I remember when Expire first started, like they were, I think their first tour was with us in Wisdom in Chains, or like Foundation, like when they were on the up and up.
Wisdom in Chains, you guys Backtrack and Expire.
I think something like that. Yeah. Like Backtrack. I think Backtrack was like getting some traction. We were getting some traction. Expire didn't exist. That Zach dude, I think he sold merch for us for a couple tours. He was always super shy and quiet. And then he got in that band, they blew up. It was cool seeing bands like do their thing. Who else? Fuck, man. That Terror tour we did.
I'm looking at a poster that says Foundation, Harness, you guys, and Twitching Tongues, which is like,
yeah, hell yeah, that's fucking awesome. That's awesome.
Up.
So a lot of that is to do with Bailey and Wayne, though, man. Like Bailey booked tours for a living, still does. And that dude networks like crazy. And same with Wayne. Wayne and him just network like crazy. Obviously, I knew my people. Like, even we'd play a show with Trapped Under Ice. I'd go up to Justice. I'm like, hey, can I have your phone number? And then I would just fucking pester him. Like, I'm sure I annoyed the hell out of him. Trying to get, like, seriously, that's what we would do, right? And then Bailey knew tons of bands, and like the Ghost Inside. We would play with the Ghost Inside. Dude, we don't sound anything like the fucking Ghost Inside. But those dudes, I guess, thought we had a lot of heart. And they were like, you know what, we're going to help you guys. So then they would take us on tour, or Stick to Your Guns. That dude, Jesse, he sang on one of our songs. And we don't, we're not in the same league as those guys.
And Jesse sang on?
He sang on one of the songs off that last full length, Ghost Among Men. I forget what the song is. But like,
if it's those, or not.
Those dudes would like look out for us and take us on tour because we had a lot of heart and we were on tour all the time. And they would always hold true. They'd be like, yeah, we should play some shows one day. And sure as shit, within a few months, we'd be like jumping on their tour for 5 shows, sometimes a month, yeah, I don't know. It was cool. We played a lot, like some of the funnest tours we did. There was no hardcore bands on the tour, like that 4 Year Strong Set Your Goals tour. Those were all hardcore kids playing in pop punk bands. And I think we opened, or were the second band to play every day. And it was a fucking blast. Because during our set, we're covering Buried Alive and Hatebreed. And so you had all these guys that are hardcore kids playing pop punk bands, and they would just destroy their fans. I remember 4 Year Strong would like go on stage because they wear these white shirts, and they would literally have blood on their shirts from beating the shit out of people during our song, which was probably their fucking fans. And then they'd go up and play there. It was awesome, man. And like,
dang.
We would do like load-ins on that tour. There was 5 bands. It was like us. It was like 4 Year Strong, Set Your Goals, us. I can't remember the other bands.
See if I can find that poster.
What was that band called? Fireworks from Detroit. During load-in every day, they would play Pantera, the sound guy. And I shit you not, every day on that tour for a month, we would load in gear to these empty venues. The sound guy would have Pantera cranked, and every dude was just moshing. There'd be like 25 of us, just like because we had the whole venue to ourselves, right? And it was like some of the best memories. Actually, we ended up getting tattooed on that tour. Justin was playing for us. He tours a DJ now, and he got Gig Life tattooed on his leg. So some guy came to our Cleveland show and tattooed Gig Life on all of our legs, and everyone got super affected, like up in some sweaty ass venue in Cleveland. But yeah, it was good times.
Set Your Goals, 4 Year Strong, Fireworks, The Swellers, and Gravemaker is such a
that's what it was. Yeah,
crazy, unexpected tour package.
But that's literally guys who Set Your Goals being like, hey, we're buddies. Like, because I toured with Maddie who Set Your Goals when we were kids, we were in high school.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, we'll take you on tour. And dude, the dudes always did. Even on tours, we sound like no other band. We just had a lot of heart, and guys liked us. Wayne, everybody loved Wayne. Bailey was such a he was good at his job in booking and networking. And then I knew a handful of people. So we would just get scooped up. Even dudes from Parkway Drive, like, dude, we have no business touring Parkway Drive, but I knew some of the guys from previous tours and stuff. And they're like, yeah, we'll take you on tour. Sure shit. Take us on a US tour. Like, had no business playing in front of that many people. But the guy, it was just cool because they're hardcore kids playing in metal bands or hardcore kids playing in punk and pop punk bands. But we all are from like the same upbringing, so they would scoop us up. So
yeah. And it seems like obviously we're skipping ahead a little bit, but by the time you guys are putting out Ghost Among Men, that puts you on to Victory. But even in the midst of that, like, were you guys always trying to be as DIY as possible because you had people like Bailey within the core group versus trying to rely on other people to do stuff for you?
To be honest, man, like, never really thought about it. It was just, we need merch. Bailey started a merch company. We need to go on tour. Bailey started a touring company. A booking company.
Right.
Wayne and I helped where we could. Bailey was a fucking workhorse, man. He booked and booked and booked. And we were also kind of guinea pigs for him. Like, we did the first band to ever tour Central America. We did a handful of shows down there in Mexico, and he had contacts all over. So Bailey would do all our booking, and then we would print our shirts for nothing at a screen printing shop, a couple bucks. And then we always just stayed at people's houses. I always slept in the van. That was my job. In my freaking pea brain, I thought if anybody tried to break in, if I was sleeping in the van, I'd stop them, which would never happen. But that's what I thought at the time. But yeah, like, everything was DIY because I didn't know there was another option. I mean, we never even used that word. There was DIY. We didn't even talk about it. It was just like, hey, this needs to get done. Let's put in some fucking work. We did a lot of shows, a lot of touring. It was always about the band. And like, we were lucky enough that we booked so many shows back to back that there was no time to go home and try to, okay, now I got to get a job. It's like, if we're going to do this, let's just stay on tour. And like, I'd come home for a week and like stay with some buddies. And it's like, okay, next tour. Cause it was easier to stay on tour and just keep playing shows. There was a couple stints where we took some time off and I would go up north and work on the oil rigs, or I'd go work construction to go pay off some merch bills or pay off the van bill. And then you just go right back to tour again. So yeah, it was always DIY, I guess, just because there was no other option, you know, There was just what people did back then.
Yeah. Like, so it is, I guess maybe just, it was just the way that you guys were doing things where maybe in a couple of years, you know, not to say that other bands are doing a similar kind of thing where they're just like, well, we need to make it happen. And then maybe the, like, you know, the history as far as when the terminology of DIY was kind of coined is something that we could probably spend a lot of time learning off about. But like, just, it was kind of like necessary just to take all of the ownership and responsibility and the actual action behind doing something, because like again, this is during a time where like you're emailing and you're like calling people on a payphone. You don't, like, you're looking at a map when you're driving to these shows. Like, you know, technology has come so far and has kind of made it so a lot easier to be in a band. But like at the time, like if you really wanted to be on tour and do all these things, like it sounds like it required your whole being and your whole life to be able to make it happen.
It did, man. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, we hit it hard for, I would say, 5 years. And then we all started a new journey. But it was kind of the best way for us to do it, because like Bailey and Wayne and I were still best friends. We still talk all the time, but it's like, hey, if we want to do this, we just got to go full in. And when we were doing a lot of those shows that Bailey was booking, they were small in the beginning, but like I booked shows in Vernon. I rented out a little strip mall, and I remember like making all my posters at Staples and going around town on every freaking pole and doing shows for hardcore bands and providing a jam space. So then when we started touring, you know, in my early 20s and stuff, a lot of those promoters that Bailey was getting us shows with just reminded me when I was doing shows. And so we'd always have like a deep sense of appreciation, because I know how much work went into like doing this show. And we'd always like, you know, we always would just try to be appreciative, and like it always was, you know, full circle kind of. I always, you know, filled my heart, you know, going to like, we'd be in the Midwest, or Alberta's always great to us, playing shows all over. And these kids were playing floor shows at VFW halls. And I'm like, this is the fucking shit. This is awesome. Because this is like what I used to do when I was booking shows for a short little period of time. And that whole DIY term and stuff is where we felt the most comfortable. Floor shows, doing it ourselves. We signed to Victory. For me, it was cool in a sense, because that was like kind of my gateway into hardcore in the 90s, like Victory Records and Darcy's House, getting little care packages and stuff.
Right.
But like before that, like DIY is where we felt the most comfortable, because the handful of shows we had to play with a barricade, fuck me, that was the worst. I remember feeling like I felt like a circus act. It was like 20, or not 20, but there's like, you know, 10 feet from the stage to the barricade where the kids are. I'm like, dude, we don't belong here.
Right.
I hate this shit. I'd rather play floor shows. I want kids jumping on my head and like choking me out and grabbing the microphone. Like, that's where I felt the most comfortable. It wasn't at those big shows. As much as the dudes in Parkway Drive and those shows were cool to see, it was never as good as the floor shows. You know, and the DIY and the people bringing the freaking Little Caesars pizzas or the big tubs of pasta noodles with just the red sauce, and you're you know, like, yeah.
Right. So, you know, you mentioned, you guys did a handful of touring all through the States. You did Europe, you did Mexico. One of the last things that I'm seeing as far as just shit on the internet was you guys did like Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Was there any like memorable experiences or shows or moments from that? You know, because we're kind of getting towards maybe the closing aspects of Gravemaker here.
one of the most memorable moments was me pissing off my entire band because I got into a bar fight our first day, and fucking that went south real fast in Bangkok. But anyways, no, the shows were awesome, dude. Like the hardcore scene in Singapore was like a huge surprise, like an actual like genuine hardcore scene. 200 kids, maybe 150, 200 kids, maybe more. Malaysia, we played some festivals. Thailand has a freaking awesome hardcore scene. I think Bailey booked us. Oh man, I don't want to misspeak here. I know Japan was 9 shows in 2 weeks. That was in 2010. And then I think Bailey had us, I think we did like a week of relaxing and then a week of shows. And we did like a couple in Malaysia, a couple in Indonesia, Thailand or Bangkok, and then Singapore. And I think Bailey had like 7 shows maybe. And it was awesome, dude. It was so cool, like being across the planet and you're seeing all the same Madball shirts and Sick of It All shirts that you would see, back home at a show in Seattle or Vancouver. And, kids are pitting and singing along to 1 or 2 of your songs. And yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Singapore had a really, that show was awesome. And then Bangkok, they produce a good hardcore scene there too.
Mm-hmm. Were you getting in a fight at the venue, or was that a different bar that you were at?
No, these guys tried to take.
I'm not asking you to get into it if you don't want to.
I'll make it really quick because I hate fucking when people talk about fight stories. It sounds cheesy as hell, but there was some stuff going down, and 2 of the guys in my band were like, "Hey, I don't get a good feeling about this place we're at. Like, people are trying to grab our wallets," and I'm like, "Well, you're being a wimp. I'm just going to hang out here and keep hanging out." And then, sure as shit, those guys kind of tried to do the same thing to me, and then I turned around and hit the first one, but I didn't realize how many guys he was with, and it just fucking all hell broke loose.
Right.
And I was black and blue and shirt ripped off, and it was anyway. So the guys in the band were like, "We told you you should have left," and I was like, "All right, I'm sorry." And so then, but the rest of the tour was great. We met a lot of guys and like from the Australian hardcore scene, and like kids were coming to like multiple shows, and the shows were awesome, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. There's a really cool band. I don't know if you know of. They're called Whispers. They're from Bangkok.
Hell fucking yeah. Dude, hell yeah. So heavy.
I'm very curious. I'm gonna DM one of the guys because we had 2 of them on the podcast to be like, hey, were you at the Immortal Bar in Bangkok seeing Gravemaker in 2013 by chance?
Sweet. Hell yeah.
But yeah. So cool. I guess like I don't know if there was a specific as far as bands breaking up, like there's so many reasons as to why that can be. Was there kind of like a pretty clear one for Gravemaker, or was it kind of like we had a great run, we got to put out all these great records and a lot of people have stuff changing in their lives and it's time to call it? Like what was kind of like the point where things started to turn in that direction?
So like we started writing in 2007, toured from 2008 to 2013. The end of it, I was, working in construction and like working on the oil rigs and kind of picking up money. And I kind of like bought my first place. And how do I say this? I wanted to keep playing shows, but then I went back to school in 2013. And when I went back to trade school, that was 5 years. And it was balls to the wall, like night school with working days, 12-hour day after 12-hour day after 12-hour day, which is what I still do. But I didn't have the time. And Bailey and Wayne are so freaking patient. And they're like, "Hey, man, we'd love to go back out." I'm like, yes, I'm down. And then another project would start and work would fire up. And I don't know how many times I canceled on them. And I always kind of felt a little bit bad because we're homies, right? And they want to play shows. But it's just life, man. Like I got into, some grown-up shit, and my trade is very intense, and I'm never home. And if I get a little chunk of time off, it's like I want to kind of go sit on the beach and turn my brain off. I guess I don't know. I kind of fell off. I don't even really go to shows that much anymore because I wake up at 4 a.m. every day. I work 12-hour days. I usually don't get home till 7 p.m. at night. I hang with my girl for an hour or two, go to bed, start all over again. Like I got a bunch of hardcore kids in the elevator trade, and they've totally turned their life around. They're all homeowners now. Like they're fucking killing it, and they're still active. and I kind of live through them. Like, hey, you got any new bands for me? And they'll send me some new hardcore bands and stuff. But I've kind of fell off. I'll go see their bands play, Juice, or
shout out to Taylor.
You know what I'm saying? Like, Taylor's the shit, dude. He's such a and he's done so much for the scene in Vancouver. Like, when I started going to shows here, Taylor's the man. He's fucking awesome.
He's I remember meeting him. So quick little Taylor side quest here. So I knew of another melodic band from Vancouver called Take Heart, and they kind of had the counterparts kind of vibe to them. So they, were very smart and had kind of like technical riffs. And then they started this side project band called Throwing Bricks. And it was essentially the exact same lineup, but Taylor was on bass. And that was my introduction to him. And then obviously, like, Worldview would come out to Calgary and play the fest, when, my past bands would be doing that. And then, I've been a big fan of Taylor ever since I've known him. He was one of the very first, I think he's within the first 25, maybe 30 episodes of the podcast.
Oh, hell yeah.
So
sweet.
He's, and to see him kind of, do so much that he did through DPK for like doing shows, and then kind of like pass the torch to now it's Here Now that's doing it, but obviously still involved in playing stuff. I think him getting into doing, like, what's the technical word? Because in my doc I just said elevator shit, but I don't know what the technical.
Yeah, that works. I like that. So elevator technician, elevator installer, like Taylor and I and Brad Collis, he plays in that band Poison Seeds.
And dropping some new music.
Andy Andy Patillo from Get the Most. My buddy Matt McDonald, got him in. He's just like a hardcore kid, grew up with. So I've got a bunch of my buddies in the trade. But what was the question? Sorry, you asked about Taylor. The titles. It's elevator mechanic or elevator technician, but like there's a couple different departments. We build them from scratch. So we go to a brand new tower with a 50-story blank shaft, and we go in there and we install it bit by bit, bolt by bolt, every piece of steel, and we'll be there. Like this tower I'm on now, I'll be there for 10 months, 12 hours a day.
Right.
So I got Taylor, and I know some of his buddies kind of break his balls too. Like, oh, we never see you anymore. And even with Brad Collis, when I got in the elevator trade, he's like, I never see you. And he would kind of get a little pissed off at me. Then I got him in the trade, and he's like, okay, I get it now. It's just kind of consumes you, right? Which is a good thing, because the money's good, and it's a good career. But definitely kind of fell off from hardcore because I'm not up fucking late enough.
Yeah, well, and like when you're able to, like I find that when you go down different like career paths, you kind of like, I think it's totally fine when, you've been doing something for so long and then you have like a chapter or season in your life where it's like, I got to focus on this. Because there's been a lot of people who've been on the podcast where they have that kind of time, but then they can come back with like a new project because like maybe they're taking a step back a little bit because it's like, I want to take care of my body a little bit more because I've been going really hard for so long. So I think it's like more about the aspect of, I think there is two sides of the coin as far as like what's the long game and how much you do over the course of your life versus like what are you doing right now. But I don't think there's any, I don't think there's any credibility that needs to be like proved on a daily basis, because it's like with your discography and how much you guys did as one band over 5 years is like, that's more than a lot of people in bands nowadays would it even come close to.
Thanks, man. And to be honest, dude, that's kind of why I didn't want to do the podcast, because I'm like, dude, I'm not current. I don't know anything. Like, that's why I kept saying no to you, because I'm like, who wants to hear me talk? Like, I haven't played in a band in like over a decade. But I was like, you know what? Kind of what you and I said earlier. Like, I might as well just sit down and chat with you for an hour or two, because when I'm old one day and I've had enough hits to the head to have a bad memory, I can always go back and like listen, and it's good to document for myself. And that's why I was kind of asking you, could you just do Wayne or Bailey? Because like I'm like they're way more cool than I am.
I mean, like,
I fucking love those dudes. But anyways,
I'm always down to have multiple members of a band on. I like kind of like building a full picture of the lore of a band through multiple members. But let's continue to talk elevator technician, or as we've coined,
Sure, elevator shit.
Like, do you have anyone else in your family that like put you onto that, or are you kind of like the first gen of like doing that? And like, how did you discover that / like figure out about that?
So I was playing in Gravemaker, and there was this hardcore kid, kind of a legend in the Calgary scene back when I was going to shows. Daryl Marsh, have you heard of him? He's an older guy now. He's probably in his 40s now.
Oh,
he lives in he's kind of a rougher dude, but he was always an elevator mechanic and rowdy and scrappy. And him and I were always good buddies. And when I worked on the oil rigs, he's like, "You should come work in the elevator trade." And I'm like, "No, I'm good. I make good money on the oil rigs. Let's keep doing that." Well, then he got my little brother in, and Christopher called me. He's like, "Hey man, like free education. It's got good pension, good benefits, it's union." And I was like, "Okay, sweet. I would like to do it." So I just walked into the union hall here. They said, "No, we don't accept walk-ins." I just walked in anyways. I was running a crane for a highway company here, and I just walked in, gave my resume, grabbed a couple business cards, and I harassed those guys every Monday for about 6 months till they finally got sick of me and put me to work. Right. And then when I got in, basically, like I had that, I had some sort of a connection with that whole sense of like unionism, which I kind of related to the hardcore scene. And just, I don't know how I'm going to explain this correctly, but I basically just got involved right away. I started volunteering all my time in union meetings. I started teaching at the trade school at night. I climbed my way up to be the president of our local, which is like one of the strongest unions in North America. And I just went balls to the wall, like just everything into it the way I did to hardcore, right? And then as soon as I was finished school, I dumped all that free time into more unionism. And I did that for like 7 years. I just recently resigned last year. I'm letting some of the younger guys step up and do it. But yeah, like I still work on the tools full time for one of the big companies here, running towers, working with lots of fucking awesome young up and comers, and all that time, all that, what's the word? Like the connection and like the brotherhood you got from hardcore and playing in bands. I have it on my job sites. I build massive projects with tons of young guys. And we listen to freaking lots of skinhead music and, Whiskey Rebels and like Lions Law. And we listen to punk, Coxbar, while I'm teaching all these guys like how to build elevators and how to like, I don't know. I definitely fill that void that I got from hardcore with my work and with the unionism and building elevators and running these jobs. And I love my guys and my crew, and I take care of my guys, and I spend 12 hours a day with them 6 days a week. And so I feel very grateful. And it's also kind of hard to take time off. So I just kind of, I haven't really been able to kind of give Bailey and Wayne or any of our fans like steady dates to go back on tour. So yeah, I just kind of replaced one with the other, and it has filled the void. It's given me purpose. Like I enjoy working with all the young up and comers, and I enjoy working with my hands and building shit. And I don't know if you've heard the company. It's called Otis. They're like a pretty big worldwide elevator company. They got a lot of shit here, a lot of big towers.
Is that ODIS?
Pardon me, it's OTIS.
Oh,
so yeah, they're like a big worldwide elevator company. So yeah, they've been great to me, man. Like
worldwide.
Let's go. But yeah, so kind of my part too, like as I got in, was just any of my buddies that were like killing it hard. Like Taylor was such a hard worker, but he was not being treated well, underpaid, overworked. Scooped him up, gave him an opportunity. Andy, same thing, super talented. Overworked, underpaid, scooped him up. And I just kept doing that to all my buddies that were in the hardcore scene, where I call it the same thing: super hard worker, underpaid, taken advantage of, scooped him up. So I kind of gave all my buddies in the hardcore scene, their own like keys to the door, and they've paved their own path by themselves. But that was kind of me giving back a little bit. So yeah.
I love the beginning when you were mentioning of like, oh, we don't do walk-ins. And I feel like when you tell someone who has the hardcore upbringing to be like, oh, we don't do this, and it's like, oh, watch me just be so unrelentingly like in your face for 6 months.
Yeah, dude, I know. I think they gave me the job because they're like, can you make this fucking guy stop calling me? Just put him to work.
Yeah.
And then I start, and they're like, sorry, go on, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I think a lot of people don't really recognize like how many like skills and like just different behaviors that you can build and disciplines that you can build when you play in just shitty little punk and hardcore bands. And a lot of people, like, if people want to stay within like the music industry and still apply that and become a like a booking agent, or they're a band manager, or they're like a musician, they've been able to do that. Like, that's great. But I'm a believer that you can take those things and you can input it into any and all industries that you're working in.
Agreed.
And it might, even when it feels like unconventional, like it's still like, there are a lot of like, it's really funny. I know that you were mentioning, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I was on your Instagram and I saw that you posted your like you sold your one of your places in Vancouver a couple of years ago. And I do real estate video and photography, so I was like kind of like watching it from that perspective as well. But like there are aspects of my job when I'm going out and I'm talking to people and I'm like managing my day that I'm like, this is stuff that like I trace back to when it's like you're in a band and you're like, a problem arises and you're scrapping, a backup plan together to make something happen, or like how, and a lot of people, like even just the resiliency of problem solving is like something bad happens and they're like, oh fuck, shit. And then like for people like us who have the experiences that we have, we're like, okay, we're just on to the next thing and we're just like, making it happen. So yeah, like at least was that kind of like when you were getting into doing the elevator work, was that like instantly, or were you kind of like, oh, I want to kind of make a shift here and like trying to do more because it's second nature for me?
I've always worked construction and I've always worked with my hands, and like even on tour Gravemaker, we would do our own oil changes in the back of Walmart parking lots, and we would, Wayne was handy, and like Bailey and I went to the rigs together for the first time. So like I was always like a construction guy playing in a hardcore band. I remember guys would stick to your guns, like having van issues, and they would ask us what's going on, or I'd be sleeping in the back of the van, which is rare because I had to do most of the driving for a good chunk there. I just hear a tap on the window. Hey, can you back our trailer up? I'm just like, yeah, sounds good. I get out of my van because I like, you know what I'm saying? And it was awesome, man. It was awesome. But when I got into that industry, like it was just, I didn't stop to really think about it, man. I've always just been very moving forward, never take the time to really stop and think. It's something I'm actually working on because I'm never really present, if that makes any sense.
Dude,
but I'm just exactly I'm just super, super fucking driven. And I'm like always 10 steps ahead. And I learned that before I was in Gravemaker, probably hustling when I was out on my own for those younger years. And then that transformed into Gravemaker work ethic, like Wayne and Bailey, like insane work ethic, those two. Still to this day, I had it as well. And we dumped all that energy into the band. And then when Gravemaker like organically stopped playing shows, then Wayne did the same fucking thing with his leather company. Bailey as well. They both done amazing for themselves. And then I dumped mine into construction or trades. And I never really stopped to think about it, man. I've always just had this drive and work ethic. I've been blessed. I don't know where I get it from. But I just don't have any quit in me. And I'm just, like you said earlier, like anytime there's a problem, it's like, okay, cool. How are we going to fix it? It's not like, oh, why is this always happening to me? Or, oh, what am I going to do? It's like, okay, cool. What's the solution? And that's the way to have a better quality of life, in my opinion. I don't really stop for too long if things go south. It's like, okay, we got to fix this. Right. So, and yeah, I don't know, man. Like I always had guys that I toured with that were built the same way. Like very rarely do we have guys who are like complaining or didn't want to be there. It was like, dude, it was relentless. We did show after show after show after show, tired, no sleep, fucking dollar menu from Wendy's, malnourished, and no one said a fucking word, dude. The guys were so good.
Respect to the dollar menu Wendy's and not McDonald's. A little higher quality levels.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I know that answers your question, but I didn't really take too much time to think about it. It was just basically on to the next. And it was really fucking hard to get in. So I basically just went balls to the wall because the layoffs are so high, right? Like it's a very hard industry to get in. So as soon as I got in, I'm like, I refuse to be laid off. Right. So I made sure to outwork everybody. So the supervisors would come to site and start laying guys off. And then the senior guys would be like, McRae stay. I'd be like, copy that, and I would just fucking work my ass off for those guys. And so I've always had a job. During all our big layoffs and stuff, I've never been laid off, and I guess that's
that how it works. Is like you could just be at your job site, and then someone comes in, they're like, we're cutting like labor, and they're just bang, bing, bang, boom.
Yep.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well, when the wages are a livable wage, the companies aren't going to pay you if there's no work. So development is done. So say a project, like I'm on a 52-story tower in town here. As soon as this tower is done, if they don't have a tower for me to go to, they're not going to just pay us to stay at home. So everyone gets laid off. So you always want to be a step ahead of everybody. That's the wrong way to say it. You always just want to be good at your job. Right. And if you fuck around and you're a slacker and you no-show, when it's time for layoffs, like those are the guys that'll get treated accordingly, and the ones that bust ass and do what they're paid to do, then those are the guys that stay. So
yeah. And even there's aspects of like there's a lot of bands that will just kind of like phone it in and just kind of do some stuff, but it's when it's like the bigger opportunities, like the fests and the bigger those things, like there's obviously going to be like certain levels of like so-and-so knows so-and-so, and there's some of that. But like, I find nowadays when a festival announcement comes up, it's like, I would say 90% of the bands on that poster deserve to be there. And you just become an undeniable force in that way. And I think that you can do that with your work as well. Like, there's aspects with my job where like, when I've been just doing what I do just to the best of my abilities, and then my boss is calling me and being like, anything luxury that we have coming through, I'm giving it to you, because like certain people are like either not performing as well, or just a little bit like things are just a little not as consistent as your stuff, and I want to be able to like you be my go-to person for that.
Hell yeah.
It sounds like
that's awesome.
It's the same for you. It's like, if even if there's one guy that's left, it's gotta be McRae.
Well, and I tell guys too that I work with, when I was teaching school and running towers and stuff, is like, your attitude is the most important thing, because we can teach people how to build things. We can teach people how to build elevators. But I've worked with some of the most talented mechanics that have the fucking worst attitude. They get nowhere because people don't want to work with them, right? So for me, I don't think I'm an amazing elevator installer. I think I'm a good mechanic. I'm decent at my job, but it's attitude over everything. And that's how you thrive in these big groups. You sit on a high-rise crew with 15 guys. Personality and attitude is everything, right? I've always been pushing that. I want guys to come in and, have a good attitude, leave your drama at home. And, and then building elevators will come later, right? So, yeah. Jocko, I was listening to the Joe Hardcore episode. I love how Joe from This Is Hardcore just instantly just went from the beginning. Hell yeah. Have you listened to it yet?
Sorry, can you say that again? You just lagged a little bit on my end.
Oh, I was saying I was listening to your podcast with Joe Hardcore, and he just went off the start of your podcast about Jocko. Have you listened to it yet? It's so good.
It was like all the love to Joe, but Jordan and I were talking after. It's like, was that like did he just like shoe in an ad for Jocko?
Totally.
Yeah. I feel like I need to get a piece of that if
Hell yeah.
But yeah, that is very funny that you brought that up. I'm sure a lot of avid listeners of that show probably feel the same way. But
yeah, for sure.
Much love to Joe, and a very middle level love to Jocko. I have no horse in that race.
Yeah, gotcha.
Here's a question, and this might sound a little just random, but did you, when the whole aspect of like the fear of heights is kind of like, if you're whatever, like I have recently thought about this because I knew we had this coming up, and I shot a townhouse on like the 24th floor of a space downtown, and I was like, this is high. And I can only imagine if you're doing 52 stories, it's double that. So when you were getting into that, you're like, oh yeah, I'm good with heights, and then it's like, oh, we are this high, or are you like, no, I could be like on a 100-story building and I'm chilling?
I don't have fear of heights. I'm lucky in that aspect. Huge part of Gravemaker, we used to tour. Every time we rolled to a town in Kentucky or Switzerland or whatever, we'd find the locals. Where is there a fucking cliff we can jump off of? It was always to find water, like Bailey, Wayne, and I. Oh, dude. And so I've been lucky, man. I don't have a fear of heights. the boys and I did do a lot of cliff jumping and stuff growing up and
Right.
Graymaker days. But when I got in the trade, it was just like, hey, this is what we're doing. So you don't think about it. You're 500 feet in the air, scaling beams, and everything looks so small down there that it's hard to fathom some days. And so, but we were given like proper equipment and stuff like that. And I build everything from scratch. So I build my brakes and my guides and everything. And I trust my work and I go over my guys' work, and it's pretty safe, man. Like the heights part of it. I mean, if you're scared of heights, I guess you're kind of screwed. But I've never had a fear of heights, and I got no issues climbing around in there. I enjoy
on the application form. Like, are you good?
Well,
with heights?
Dude, it should be, because the amount of grown ass men that have been sent to my site that I'm like, hey, hop on that and move it for me. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, jump on there and move that. And they're like, I can't. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I got a fear of heights. And I'm like, you're in the wrong trade, buddy. Or we've had guys like scale out on beams, because we got to scale out on beams and do our work some days. And I've had guys like try to be all macho, and they scale out and then they freeze. And then I'm like, okay, come on back. And they're frozen. I got to go up there and fucking save them, bring them back in. I'm like, hey, I think you need to find a new job. So those guys squeak in once in a while, but for the most part, like, you just don't think about it, dude.
Yeah.
Just get in there, get after it. There's so much going on with all the rigging and hoisting, and in construction too. It's fucking very high pace, very go. So you don't really have time to stop and think about your heights, and you just basically trust your equipment, trust your install. The most dangerous thing, to be honest, is my little brother is in a different department called maintenance. So he would go, I don't know if you guys have an elevator where you guys live, but basically all these existing residential buildings or commercial, they need a maintenance guy to maintain them, to keep them running. So Christopher and I work in two totally different worlds. His world in maintenance is actually, I don't know, some would say more dangerous, because it's one man work and the guys are walking into live buildings and the guys get crushed because they forget a safety circuit so that's when I worked at the Union Hall, I'd get the paperwork or the pictures of guys getting crushed and killed. And a lot of the times they're maintenance guys, they forget to lock something out. Elevator comes, crushes them, and gets them stuck in between the door of the elevator, crushed with the counterweight, crushed in the pit. And construction, I guess everyone's a little bit more hyper aware because it's so fucking crazy. And it's like, It's a huge adrenaline rush when we're in there. I think that's half the reason why I like it. Mm-hmm. But there's so much going on, and you're working in crews. So if I'm having a weak moment, I have multiple guys with me being like, hey, buddy, just heads up, like, pay attention. And I'm like, okay, cool. Where are those maintenance guys? A lot of them are by themselves, and unfortunately, a lot of fatalities come with those guys. The death rate on a whole is quite high. Like, it's a pretty dangerous trade. Mm-hmm. But I feel in construction, I could just be biased, but I feel construction is dangerous because everyone's like it's like a team environment, right? And you're always like hyper aware, man. Like, there's so much shit when you're looking at the hoistway, all our rigging and chains and ropes and wire. You're always like hyper aware when you're in that work area. And I think the maintenance guys, they get complacent sometimes, So anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely think that with whatever you're doing, when you have at least a couple other brains to bounce stuff off of, like, even in my world, like, a lot of the time I'm by myself, or I'm just with like, a realtor or a homeowner who's like letting me in. But like, sometimes, like, when I'm doing photos at a property, and then we have our like one of our videographers who's doing it, and we're like wanting to, like, we're like, oh, like, this would be cool if we kind of like shot the kitchen countertop this way, or like, because you can kind of like bounce off of each other, or in your case, like, kind of hold each other accountable and like kind of aware of when things are happening. But it's probably obvious, but it's like a lot of stuff can go wrong if there's like, just kind of like one vision and one kind of perspective when
big time.
And there's also the aspect of like when there's, I guess, like, I'm not saying you have to kind of get into like who's to blame when a fatality happens, like, because there's a lot of time where like my dad comes through, like, he's in sales for the trucking industry, and when I was working there, like, they would talk a lot about how like, if the company owns a truck and a bunch of different drivers are doing it, and there's no kind of like post trip of the vehicle to kind of make sure everything's good, a driver could pick it up, they do a pre-trip, and even if they don't catch something there, then something could go wrong down the road and maybe cause a crash, or even one to multiple fatalities. So I don't know if there's an aspect of that, but yeah, there's just so many moving parts in your world. So it's unfortunate. It sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a blast though, man. I mean, and it's been fun having some other hardcore kids join in because even Taylor, like I'll go see his band play once in a while, and it warms my fucking heart, dude, to see how well he's done in the hardcore scene. Because I'm not speaking poorly of the scene when I started going to shows here in 2002, 2003 in Vancouver, and then 4 or 5. But the scene just never was really there. Like there was like a decent amount of hardcore kids, and we saw like Hatebreed on tour here with Ensign, and like we'd see, certain bands would try to get across, but the border was always such a fucking nightmare. Right. And so our scene sucked. And maybe I had something to do with it. Maybe it's because I wasn't involved with booking enough shows and stuff. But we were religiously going down to Seattle and the States all the time to get our fix. And then I kind of, I never really looked at Vancouver having that big of a hardcore scene. And then watching like what Taylor and that whole generation, I don't know if you want to call it the generation after me or whatever that is, there's a bit of a gap. I've been to a handful of his shows, and it's just like I get goosebumps because I see these kids just hitting, and like a lot of these bands are so heavy now, dude. And like I love seeing that because I guess when I was younger going to shows here, it was more like youth crew and like melodic, and like we would still dance hard, but now it's like heavy. I listened to your band recently, like it's heavy, which is what's awesome, right? So yeah, and even Brad's still loyal to the hardcore, and he's plays in Poison Seeds with my buddy Rinder. I went to see them play and just watching all these young kids just beat the piss out of each other. It makes me very happy. It makes me happy. I love it, dude. Right? Because like that. I mean, I'm not going to go anywhere near because I'm an old man now. I'm freaking. I don't feel like getting punched in the face, but it definitely warms my heart to see, and I still kind of have that little connection, even though it's a working relationship, but they still fill me in, and like I still try to go see their bands. I went to see Brad Collis' band as soon as they were done. I'm just like, love you, buddy. I gotta go to bed. So
exactly.
I didn't see the rest of the bands, but yeah.
What was the last show that you went to locally?
Dude, my girlfriend is in love with what's that band called? City and Color. And I got us tickets, and they played at Rogers Arena. Dude, that venue is like 10 or 15,000 people. And the dude who wrote Home is Where the Heartache Is, that 7-inch, Matt Kelly, he plays in City and Color now. So he's been with City and Color for like 10 years. Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? So we went and I bought tickets for my girlfriend and I, and we went and saw them, and I was super late till like 10 p.m., but it was worth it. Yeah, it was cool. We saw City and Color, and they're not a hardcore band by any means. And then before that was probably Poison Seeds. I went and saw Taylor and Brad and Rinder kick some ass in Surrey, I think. That was a few months ago. My buddy TJ plays in a few bands here, TJ Reynolds. I try to go see them, but it's pretty few and far between.
Right.
But, yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty crazy on how far Vancouver has come in the last number of years. Crazy. Like I remember talking when Taylor was on the podcast of like when he moved from I can't remember if he's from New York or New Jersey. Yeah. So when he moved from New York and there wasn't as much just hardcore stuff, I think that like there was a lot of punk shit happening, but not like hardcore. So to see all the stuff that he's done and then kind of passing the torch, and like stuff is going so well that when bands come on like a way bigger tour package and they're playing the fucking what's the giant venue you guys have out there?
The Rickshaw?
Yeah. When it's like a 5-band bill that's playing the Rickshaw, and then they're doing like a 2-band after show at like 333.
Yeah, 333.
Yeah. Or I think even recently, I think there was a show with Take Offense. You guys have played with Take Offense. Way back in the day. But they were coming through on tour. I think the show got canceled, and then Here and Now scooped them up and did like a really last minute dope show at like Bullies, which is like 120 cap, like tiny little room. But
love it.
That's just like the way. And I think there's a lot of other people throughout Western Canada. And I think that's going to have some really good momentum being built behind it.
Did Taylor tell you when he got into hardcore in New York?
I think so. It's been a long time since we had that chat.
he said there's no hardcore in New York, like you just said a couple minutes ago. It's because he grew up in like a small town, I think like 4 hours north or something like that. So it was like a smaller town in New York State.
Oh, okay.
And when I met him, he was just a young up and comer. He told me, and I might be misspeaking here, but I think Gravemaker was the first band or one of the first bands he ever heard or saw or listened to or whatever. And that kind of like helped him get into hardcore. And then he moved out here, and I think he saw us play a handful of times and then just got like involved in the scene. And now, he's blown up and done tons. But yeah, I think he was telling me that Gravemaker was one of the first hardcore bands he ever heard or saw. And it's just funny because then he ends up moving from New York State across the freaking continent to Vancouver. And then we become kind of buddies, right? And we're, we're
now
a little
coworkers.
bit of an age gap, right? But he was always just doing cool shit. And then, then got him in the trade, and now we're coworkers. And I was actually just talking to him last night. So yeah, it's just funny how life kind of unravels, right?
Yeah. It's very funny when you make connections again through music, and whether it takes, multiple years of coming through. Like there's people that when I grew up in Winnipeg, that I made connections through playing through shows, and it's like I'm almost like excited to like maybe run into that person when I'm coming through town to play a show, or if I'm traveling and I just like randomly run into them, because then it's like we pick up right where we left off. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
there's always been a special connection with hardcore, man. I mean, obviously, I've said multiple times I'm a little detached, but dude, even when I've run into old homies that even if we did one tour together, you'd run into them, and it was just like big hugs. How you been? You always have like a bond from touring with people and like playing shows, and especially living in a van together. Like I don't see Wayne and Bailey nearly enough, but anytime I run into them, it's just like, it's just like we never skipped a beat, and that's all from the hardcore scene and going to shows and playing in bands and stuff. It's always been a very unique friendship, unique bond that I've never really had anywhere else. Obviously, I'm in trades and stuff now, and I work alongside a lot of union brothers, but it's not ever been the same as the connection, the relationship you have in the hardcore scene, especially too, like I find a lot of the hardcore kids that I grew up with and friends with, and even people I know today, a lot of us came from the similar beginnings, right? A lot of felt like outcasts and, harder times. And I don't want to say broken homes, but, just not your traditional upbringing. And so the hardcore scene always kind of gave us a special bond. And like a lot of people too, man, we didn't have to talk about it. We just knew, you just knew you were all cut from the same cloth, and you all had some fucked up shit go down when you were young. And then you just had like the hardcore scene as your outlet and like your family and your sense of belonging and stuff. So yeah.
John, a couple other questions before I start to wrap up.
Cool.
I was perusing on the Facebook, and I saw that you guys made a post about that there might have been a Boost Mobile commercial with one of your songs on it. Do you remember that?
I think I heard that. I think when we got signed to Victory, I think you're right. It was a Boost Mobile, and then there was maybe like what's that other show? It was like late night something, or there was a nighttime show that was happening.
Find the post, because I think some people were saying it was in the commercial, and then some people was like, oh, it was just in the background of like the video that someone was taking.
I think there was two. From what I remember, there was two. One was like a commercial, and one was on like a TV thing or something like that. I don't remember.
Okay, yeah. So this is from April 9th, 2011. Can anyone help us find the Boost Mobile commercial that supposedly has a Gravemaker song in it?
Awesome. Yeah, I think I remember hearing about that.
But anyone who is listening who might know where that is, send that through, because I need to see that. Oh, yeah. I will plug Boost Mobile if it means
nice.
Giving some airtime to Gravemaker. Is there any, in all the, I guess, like lyrical content when it comes to Gravemaker, is there any lyrics that you wrote? A lot of these songs are like almost 15 years old at times, but is there any lyrics that you wrote that you find yourself revisiting in the current stage of your life, and you're like, wow, like I was talking to my future self here? Is there any of that?
I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but I guess I always had a hard time listening to my own music. And I don't know if other people are like that. I've heard people say they do podcasts and they can't even listen to themselves speak. I've always been really hard on myself, and I've always had a hard time going back and listening to our own stuff and my own lyrics, and I critique myself, and like I even do that with my installs. I'm like, I'll have an engineer come look at my install, and I'm already pointing out like the 2 things I don't like, and he's like, dude, relax, it's good, it's fine. And I'm like that with myself with music too. Like I had to revisit our lyrics because I knew I was in the podcast with you, and I don't really revisit them, to be honest, but I have been hit reading through some of the lyrics and, getting a bit, was the word sentimental, because a lot of the lyrics, well, there was a bit of a group involvement with it. Like Wayne would help a little bit, and myself, and we would like write lyrics together. But a lot of the lyrics that I wrote had a lot to do with like addiction and like escaping addiction or feeling like an outcast or searching for a sense of belonging. Or it was sometimes when I go back and hear it or listen to it, I just kind of like, it's almost like that conversation we had earlier about like leaving Vernon and like not wanting to associate with it. So with Gravemaker, like some of the lyrics, it's kind of hard to read just because it's like a lot of the stuff I wrote about was like kind of dark and when I was going through stuff, but it also felt amazing screaming those lyrics at the top of my fucking lungs at punk shows and hardcore shows. But I don't really go back and revisit them often.
Yeah.
And
because it's like,
I don't know,
former shed skin.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and I'm grateful that I had it, but I've always just been really hard on myself, man. Even like I'm into powerlifting and stuff now, and like it's never good enough. My installs, I'm very fucking hard on myself. And same thing with Gravemaker. I was like, oh, I hate my voice, or oh, I hate my lyrics. And even though I'll get, we'll have, a handful of kids singing along and losing their mind, I'm still like, I've always been kind of critical on myself, but I've always admired fucking Wayne's drumming. I'll tell you that. And like working with Roger Camaro and working with the guys that helped us write all the songs, like they're fucking talented as hell, and Bailey. But as far as visiting my lyrics, no, I don't really go back and have a super deep connection with them. I'm more so like, oh, I'm happy I'm not like living in like addiction anymore and like struggling and I'm still alive. And I remember there was a lyric I wrote, like, I'm just trying to find it the day about, because when I was in Vernon growing up and like addicted to drugs and stuff, I was always told I would never see my 19th birthday because I'd be dead, because that was what everybody predicted. And so like I'd always sing that part, and that, when I was singing that line, I was like in my early 20s, and then I made it to my 30s, and now I'm almost 40. That line was cool because I was always told I'd be dead from addiction or doing stupid shit. So like that one I kind of connected with. But I don't know if that really answers your question, but I don't really look back on it too much, to be honest.
You've lived a lot of life, and a lot of life that's been like in totally different sectors, and I think, especially when you make art, like sometimes it is for yourself at the time, but like it also becomes timeless and it becomes applicable, and people can listen to it, and maybe there's a subtle selfish hope that there's some kid in 2024 that I'm putting Gravemaker on in a way, and maybe they're listening and then they're reading the lyrics and they're dealing with something that's related to what you were dealing with in
I got you.
Late teens and early 20s. And like, that's, to me, that's like a beautiful thing where we can make stuff and it kind of exists, whether it's online or there's physical or there's a combination, and people can in their own lives discover it, and then they can take something
I agree
on and have it's a indefinite and infinite like ripple effect. It's it's pretty crazy. But like, I think the music, on the musical side, lyrics and songwriting and everything in between, like, it's Burn Me at Sea specifically was such a informative and such a crucial record for me, and it's pretty crazy on how me buying that at the CD store and then coming to this very moment here. So yeah,
that's cool, man.
Very full circle just to
that's awesome
be doing this with you, man.
And I love when you mentioned earlier, like you bought it based on what it looks like, because that was such a thing when we were younger, was going to like the CD store. I don't even know how much they were back then, and basically buying a CD just based off what it looked like.
Exactly.
And then going home and being like, yes, this one's heavy.
Yes. Yeah. You're like, that's awesome. Great.
Now it's like freaking overload to me, because obviously I have Spotify now, and I listen to, dude, it's just like, it's insane how much music's on there, and it's like never ending. Right. To the point where I got songs on my playlist that I work out to that I don't even know who the fucking band is. So I'm just like, oh, this song's heavy, just because it just keeps spitting at the Spotify radio, right? But back then when we were younger, it was like, go to the store, buy something based on what it looks like. I hope this is heavy. I hope this is heavy. Put it on.
And then you're like,
reading every lyric. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like, oh, great, I got a stinker. And then you just like,
totally.
You have to go back and hope for the best.
For sure.
I again, like maybe it's not the thing that's been thought about the most, but I gotta ask, has there been any discussions or thoughts about Gravemaker being on stage ever again in the short or near future?
Well, we discussed about going back on tour last year. Bailey and Wayne and I had a meeting, and we were talking about going back out. I think it was last March. What year is it? What month is it? So yeah, basically a year ago.
What year?
Sorry. Oh, dude, my life's a blur. So it was March of last year, I'm pretty sure. We were agreeing to go out and play a handful of shows Bailey wanted to do. Mexico, because Mexico has always been a second home for us. The hardcore scene in Mexico is insane. And then do some Southern California shows. And so we had like one or two meetings, and we're like sourcing out who'd play guitar. And then again, classic Jon McRae, I just was like, boys, I'm too busy. I can't. So I canceled. And they've always been sweet about it. And they never, ever, ever give me attitude or resent, like they never get mad at me. But I was like, oh, fuck, I did it again. So we talked about it last year. And then again, I got too busy with work. But, maybe one day we will. Or, Calgary, I always say Calgary and falling down the Midwest was always amazing to us. I remember playing smaller cities and just getting the most insane reactions. And I have no desire, no offense to, California or like the massive hardcore scene in New York City. Like it was always like those like smaller towns that we always had the most fun in. And if we ever play a show again, it would definitely be around Alberta or, the Midwest, floor show, something like that. And, maybe I didn't even know people still listen to our band. So maybe I got to get back on the horn with Bailey and Wayne and set something up, come play a Calgary show or something like that. And I know Taylor's been awesome about it. He's gave us a couple options, and I think we got invited to play a show in Calgary a couple of times, but I always just shit the bed, man. So maybe if people actually want to see it, maybe I should just suck it up and fucking make it happen.
Kind of like how you did with this podcast. You're like, okay, we have to do it.
Dude, I know. How long have we been chatting? About a year now or longer?
I mean, I'll pull up the first DM if you'd really, want to put yourself out there that way. But
I thought when you finally sent me the last two messages, I was like, okay, this is the part where he tells me to get fucked and I'm going to stop asking you. And then I opened it. And you're just like super nice. You're like, hey man, would you be down? I'm like, yeah, this guy's awesome. I'm just going to fucking do it. Because you've been asking so nicely, but I swear to God, the last time I got two messages from you on Instagram, I was like, okay, this is the point in time where he tells me to get fucked. I'm done asking. But
I'm trying to think. So I think the first time I reached out to you was like just over a year ago. So the 1st of January, 2023. And you said you were down, and I'm a believer that great things, good things take time, but great things take a lot of time. So
cool, man. Thank you.
And I believe that this has been a really great conversation with you, Jon. One more question before we have to wrap up here.
Sure.
I end every single episode with a guest to share a favorite mosh-related story. Anything that's first off the top of your head. Could be wholesome, could be gruesome, could be something you did or just something you saw at a show. That's how we start to.
Oh, dude. I've been listening to you ask this question and like just thinking about back to like Hatebreed at Hellfest and just like all the sand or the dirt storm, like people circle pitting and just head walking and shit like that. But I think some of the most memorable moments for me is, when I was growing up in Vernon and we would do like, so that venue we ran sort of as a community. It was $500 a month, and we would pay the landlord from the mall $500, and it was a jam space, but we'd throw shows there. So basically any band that played got full every dollar we made because all the bands are paying for the rent. And so, dude, we sort of we used to have mosh practices. So I had these big PA speakers and we'd like put on Shattered Realm. And then, there'd be like 10 of us, like hardcore kids in Vernon that just knew from watching stuff on like the Hellfest videos. Mm-hmm. So this is like 2003 and we got a PA system. We got an empty venue and we would just like turn the lights down and just like practice our moves and our spin kicks. And dude, it was like so
you would turn the lights off and like we really try to replicate the moment.
We would set the mood so that when we went to Seattle with all the big boys, we would know what we were doing, and we would like practice all our like one-handed cartwheels and spin kicks and like, oh, buddy, it was fucking hilarious. And like, it was embarrassing, as the years progressed. Now I'm so old. I don't care now, right? It's funny because there wasn't like the shows, right? So we took that shit when we were like 17, 18. So what's this, 2003? So this is, a few years ago. Then we started going to shows at Graceland. And Graceland, El Corazon, always oversold, like big bands. Like, I don't know what the capacity is there, but it would be just fucking shoulder to shoulder. And my fondest memories were going to shows down there and just pushing my way to the front, jump up on the stage for Converge, turn it around, and then just head walking. And when you want to come down, you can't because it's shoulder to shoulder. So you just keep head walking all the way back and like hitting my hat off of like the pipes. Dude, it was the best, man. We would go down on like no sleep, pit all night, spin kicking and just all that shit. And then like drive home full of adrenaline. There was no energy drinks. There's no caffeine pills. We didn't drink coffee. We were all straight edge. We were just so fucking amped on life and hardcore. And it was an outlet for us too. There was a venue called Studio 7, like in South Seattle. I don't know if it's still there anymore. And it was a bit of a higher stage, but like 100 Demons played there all the time, and like Martyr AD and like all those bands. And we would just go down and it'd just be a fucking brawl, and like all the Seattle dudes were good to us and vice versa. And it was just a brawl. Like you'd come home with fucking black eyes, broken nose. My buddy Jesse broke his arm. He'd have a cast on, then take his First Blood hoodie, put his First Blood hoodie over his cast so no one could see it. Then he'd use that as a weapon and just like open dudes up. It was awesome, man. And it's hard to explain though, right? Like, so wait a second, you go and just brawl or whatever you want to call it with other grown men. And then like when the song's over, you guys like hug after. It's like, well, yeah, it's kind of what we do, And the
That's
fights are so
baby.
few. Yeah, but the fights are so few and far between, man. Like, obviously we had a handful of fights over the years during our set or other hardcore shows, but like all in all, like, you're in there swinging and kicking and fucking punching. You can take it, and it is what it is. And it was fucking awesome. So I don't know. I was trying to think about that question because I heard you ask a couple of those guys, and I started laughing about our mosh practices. 17, 18, just shattered realm.
I feel like you have opened my mind to how many other bands and people within the scene have mosh practices, but they've never admitted it. So I have to commend you on you.
Okay, so the other thing too is like when Gravemaker started playing, I was playing bass. More importantly than learning the bass tracks was me just mastering, okay, I'm going to try to learn how to jump with this bass because I just wanted to look like I was seriously, because it was more about like just losing your mind and like just freaking out than it was actually like learning your instrument. And, and I hear other guys speak about like their art and like the art of playing in hardcore bands and stuff. And it's fucking awesome to hear. And it obviously there was an artistic side for me, but it was a massive outlet, dude. Playing in bands, screaming my brains out in Gravemaker, going to shows, like pitting for every band. It was like a huge outlet for me. And obviously now I'm a grown up now and I go to therapy and other outlets now that I know are better for me. But back then I didn't know that. That was my therapy, So, but yeah, like, I guess like the Hellfest pits when we went out there, dude, like seeing Until the End. That was my first chest beat, my first tattoo. I got a big Until the End tattoo. And seeing it Until the End and like that Trust Kill era, like Bleeding Through and those bands. And I just remember Hellfest in the fairgrounds for 17-year-old kids and the fucking dust just coming up and like dudes just fucking brawling. And I was just like, this is the best. And I just remember getting like punched in the jugular. Like I think my throat collapsed and I'm just like having the best time. As soon as I can get some water back in there, like head back out again.
Reset my Adam's apple.
Yeah. It was awesome, dude. And so Hellfest. And like that show with Hatebreed I was talking about earlier, we played with them in 2008. That show was fucking bonkers. People treated us like we were terror, and we had no business being treated like that. And people just went bananas. Is that the
poster that's behind you? That's framed up there?
That is, yeah. So I was married for a long time, and my ex-wife would not let me post any Gravemaker stuff. So she was an interior designer, and my band is Tacky. So, but I moved to my girlfriend last year, so she actually made me a surprise, all our tour passes up there, and then what she could find, and then she framed some pictures of our band. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put them up. So I got this little office area.
That's a keeper move.
Yeah, it's a keeper. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. It was cool, man. But as far as mosh parts go, like that's pretty much all I can think of, man. It was good times.
I love times. The visual of you head walking and then realizing that you have to keep head walking.
Dude, you couldn't get down. Like, fuck, dude, they used to oversell that venue. Like, this is back in the day when, like, I don't think the fire marshals were as strict. And I just remember, just head, shoulder, head, shoulder, hit my hat off, okay, I want to get down. Okay, fuck, I can't get down. Okay, keep head walking and just keep trucking to the back and eventually get back to the back.
It's like the shitty CGI of the Flash, but it's just it's just Jon head walking for people.
Thank God I was thank God I was a lot lighter back then though.
Right.
I think, it'd be a little different story.
You head walking now would actually cause some potential problems for people.
Totally. Yeah.
Jon, well, this has been a really, really fun chat. It's very kind of serendipitous because, like this month specifically for the podcast has been a little strange for me because I've been working a lot more. I've been like having a lot of things, but this has kind of like re-sparked a lot of juices for me on just like, having cool people. Like, I feel like there's guests that are like the obvious, person in a current band. They put out a new record. They want to do press. That's great. And then there's people that like I'm personally like a fan of, and then some people I'm putting onto them. But and then I think there's a very special small percentage of like interviews and conversations that people didn't know that they needed until they actually have it. And I feel like this kind of falls in that, special.
Thanks, buddy.
Slice of the pie chart. I'm going to put your social links and anything Gravemaker related in the show notes in the YouTube description. Cool. But
Thanks,
if there's
buddy.
anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off on before we go.
I don't know, man. I just want to like thank all the promoters and like all the guys that always took care of us. I mean, I've never really been back to thank them, but like that's like the lifeline of Gravemaker. Us playing shows is like all the people that just hanging posters and taking care of us, giving us a place to sleep. All the fill-in guitar players we had. We had so much help over the years. Dude, we crashed our van like doing some Shia and Comeback Kid and Misery Signals, and we've always had so much fucking help since the beginning. Dude, like always, kids coming up to shows, singing along, Europe. It was like we had so much fucking love, dude. And so I'll like always be grateful for that. So I just want to thank anybody that ever like showed up and like helped us out or booked a show, gave us the floor to crash on. And then, just like, I'm really happy to see this new generation of hardcore coming up. And like, obviously these new bands that are coming out are heavy, and although I don't really go to shows, I still listen to them as much as I can, especially when I'm powerlifting and training or building elevators. And I just want to give a shout out to Bailey. If you guys ever need merch printed, Overcast, he's out down in Long Beach. He's an amazing guy who doesn't matter how big or small your band is, he'll do it for you. And Wayne, LTL Co. Leather, he's like a phenomenal craftsman making leather goods outside of or in New York City. So yeah, if you want to I want to give a shout out to my two boys. And dude, I appreciate you having me on, man. Because again, like I've said it before, I don't really stop to be present. It's something I'm working on, and I've like been able to go down memory lane this past few weeks and just kind of like trickling in all these memories and like good times and a lot of gratitude and like grateful for like the hardcore scene. And I guess sometimes I have a bit of guilt because I heard a couple of your guests and they're so fucking current, and I have like guilt because I'm like, oh, I fucking just dropped out. I like took what I wanted and then left. But again, like I appreciate you taking me on, and like it's been cool.
I appreciate all the kind words. This was definitely an interview and a kind of something I wanted to really see through, just because of how much your band has meant to me on a personal level, but I think also a legacy level for Western Canada as a whole. And yeah, this has been a really, really fun chat, dude. And yeah, like
thanks, buddy.
I feel any self-doubt as far as like falling off or not being involved, like I think any of that, I hope that you feel the love that I can just anticipate that this episode is going to bring.
I appreciate it, buddy.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people listening from Vancouver specifically who are going to be very giddy about some of the bands and shows and just different things that we got to reminisce on in this almost 2-hour conversation. So
I was nervous. It takes a lot to make me nervous. I used to chair very large union meetings and never gave a shit while speaking in front of people. I was actually nervous to come on today. I'm like, fuck, I hope I don't say the wrong thing. I'm like trying to like jog my memory. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's been fucking awesome.
Of course.
Thank you.
Dude, it's been an honor, and I hope that maybe we can do it again sometime.
Anytime. Yeah, for sure.